In this section, we're going to shift our focus to client-side development. So we're going to use jQuery AJAX to consume the APIs we built in the last section. As part of this section, I will also introduce you to two very useful jQuery plugins: Bootbox for displaying Bootstrap dialog boxes, and DataTables for displaying tables that have built-in support for pagination, searching, and sorting. Now, let's get started. All right, now we want to extend our customer list and add a delete link in front of each customer. When the user clicks this link, we're going to use jQuery to call our API, and then we'll remove this customer from the list. Now, to follow this video, you should have some basic familiarity with jQuery. If not, I highly recommend you to pause the video now and look at the PDF I have attached to this lecture. All right, now in Solution Explorer, go to Views, Customers, Index. Here I'm going to add a new table heading, tab, delete. And then when rendering a customer, TD. Inside this TD, I'm going to use a button, because semantically, we should use hyperlinks for taking the user from one page to another. But in this case, we're not going to do that. Instead, we'll display a confirmation box, and if the user clicks OK, we will remove the selected customer. So we use a button and then use a Bootstrap class called btn-link to make it look like a link. And we call this delete. So this was the first step. Now we need to use jQuery to handle the click event of these buttons. So scroll to the bottom of the file, section scripts. In this section, we add the script tag, and then we use the standard jQuery document.ready. Now we need a reference to our delete button. So let's go back. Here's the button. I'm going to give it a second class, js-delete. I've prefixed this class with js- to indicate that this class is purely for JavaScript, not for presentation. Also, I'm going to give this table an ID, customers. And then back to our jQuery code. By the way, I noticed a typo here. Document. Okay. Now we use jQuery, get the customers table, and find all elements with this class, js-delete. Next, we use jQuery on method to handle the click event, and here's our callback function. Now at this point, we should call our API, but I'm not going to do that yet. Let's just display a simple confirmation box. If that works, then we'll move on to the next step. So confirm. Are you sure you want to delete this customer? So Control F5. Okay, here's our delete link. Click. Beautiful. All right, now, if this confirm function returns true, we want to call our API using jQuery AJAX. So jQuery.ajax. Here we pass an object. We set the URL to /API/customers. Now we need the ID of this customer. So I'm going to use a data attribute here in our button, data-customer-ID, and render it like this. And then back to our jQuery code. We can get the value of this attribute using this attribute of data-customer-ID. Next, we need to set the method to delete. And finally, provide a callback function when the call is successful. Now at this point, we should delete this record from our table. But again, I'm not going to do that yet. step by step. Let's just display something in the console. Success. Save. Back to the browser. You can open up Chrome Developer Tools using Control, Shift, and I. All right, I'm going to click this link. Okay, beautiful. We got our success message in the console. And if you go to Network tab and set the filter to XHR, which shows our AJAX requests, here's our request. Go to the Headers tab. Look, here's the request URL, and the request method is delete. Now the final step. We need to remove the table row that includes this customer. So look, our button's here. We can start from the reference to our button and then navigate up the DOM tree until we get to this TR, and then we'll remove it. So in our success function, we need a reference to our button. But if we use this here, we won't get access to our button because this is a callback function. And in JavaScript, the scope of this can change in different callback functions. So in our original callback function here, which is called when the button is clicked, I'm going to get a reference to our button, this, and then use that here. So button.parents of tr.remove. As simple as that. Also, here we can replace this with button. Save. Back to the browser. Refresh. So here I've got a customer called Mosh. I'm going to delete this. Yes. Gone. Next, I'm going to show you how to replace this native JavaScript confirmation box with a beautiful modern Bootstrap dialog box. So throughout this course, you have heard me mention Bootstrap a few times. Bootstrap is basically a CSS framework for building modern and responsive applications that look good both on desktop computers as well as tablets and mobiles. Explanation of Bootstrap is really beyond the scope of this course, and that's something you need to learn on your own. But in this lecture, I'm going to show you how to replace a native JavaScript confirmation box with a Bootstrap dialog box. Now, one way to use a Bootstrap dialog box is to go to Bootstrap website and follow the steps explained in their documentation. An easier way is to use a library called Bootbox. Bootbox is an abstraction over Bootstrap that provides a number of simple functions that we can call to create different kinds of dialog boxes. You can read more about Bootbox and its features on their website bootboxjs.com. Now, to add Bootbox to our project, open up Package Manager console with Alt/period. Type install package Bootbox and set the version to 4.3.0 to make sure you get the exact same library I'm using in this video. Okay, beautiful. Now in Solution Explorer, you can see in the scripts folder, we've got two new files, bootbox.js and bootbox.min.js, which is the minified or compressed version of Bootbox. Now we're going to add a reference to bootbox.js in our bundle. So go to app_start, open up bundle config, scroll down. Here's our Bootstrap bundle, so we can add it here. Scripts, bootbox.js. Now, I'm not adding the minified file here because with these bundles, we automatically get minification when we compile the application in the release mode. I'm going to talk about that later in this course. Now, back to our index CS.html. I'm going to replace this confirm function with a bootbox function. So, bootbox.confirm. Are you sure you want to delete this customer? Now, this function, unlike the native confirm function in JavaScript, doesn't return a Boolean. Instead, it takes a callback function. So we pass a callback function here, result. Now, if this result has a truthy value, which means it's not null or undefined, then we're going to make our AJAX call. So I'm going to select this call to jQuery.ajax, cut, paste it here, and then we can get rid of this confirm function. Okay, now build, because we have modified our bundles. Back to the browser, refresh. Let's delete one of these customers. There you go. This is Bootstrap dialog box. And I think this looks much better than the native confirmation box in JavaScript. Next, I'm going to talk about a slight optimization of our jQuery code. All right, now look at this line. The way we're handling the click event of our buttons is a bit inefficient. So if you have 20 customers on this page, for each customer, we're going to have a delete button. And for each delete button, we're going to have a separate handler function in the memory. And you can imagine, the more customers we have, the more memory we're going to consume. Now we can change this selector to only customers table, and then provide a filter as the second argument of the on method. JS-delete. With this implementation, no matter how many customers we have on the page, we'll have only one click handler for all delete buttons. Why? Because in this example, our handler is hooked to this selector. And obviously, we have only one element on this page that matches the selector, the table with the ID customers. Now, in this one handler, we have a filter. So if the click event is raised from an element matching the selector, this callback function will be called. Okay? So we are done with the implementation of delete customer function. Next, I'm going to show you a very useful jQuery plugin called DataTables, which gives us pagination, sorting, and filtering right out of the box. Okay, in this lecture, we're going to use a very useful jQuery plugin to add pagination, sorting, and filtering to our customers table. So open up Package Manager console and install package jQuery.DataTables. Set the version to 1.10.11. Now this happened magically fast here because I trimmed the video, but on your machine, it's going to take quite a few seconds, so be patient. Now in Solution Explorer, in Scripts folder, you see a new folder, DataTables, with lots of scripts. Most of these JavaScript files are extensions to DataTables, which give us more functionality. But at the core, we're going to use only 2 scripts here. So let's go back to our bundle config. Now, before adding DataTable scripts, I'm going to consolidate a couple of these bundles. We need jQuery and Bootstrap on pretty much all pages. So if you go to Solution Explorer, open up Views, Shared, Layout, and scroll to the bottom, you'll see we have 2 references here. One for the jQuery bundle and the other to Bootstrap. So I'm going to consolidate these 2 into a new bundle, which I call lib, which represents third-party libraries. Delete. Save. Now back to our bundle config. I'm going to rename this jQuery bundle to lib. So here we have the jQuery scripts. Now I'm going to bring in the scripts from Bootstrap bundle. So these 3 files. Cut. And paste them here. And then we get rid of this Bootstrap bundle. Okay, that's better. Now in our lib bundle, I'm going to add DataTables scripts. One is scripts, DataTables, jQuery.DataTables.js, which is the core DataTable script. And the other is /scripts/DataTables/DataTables.bootstrap.js. which integrates DataTables with Bootstrap. Make sure you don't have a typo here, otherwise your code is not going to work. Also, we need to add DataTables style sheet to our CSS bundle. So scroll down. This one is going to be under content /datatables/css/datatables.bootstrap.css. So this style sheet makes DataTables look like Bootstrap tables. Now we go back to our index.cs.html. In document.ready, before handling the click event, we get a reference to our customers table and simply call DataTable function on it. This is the simplest way to use DataTables plugin. Now build, because we have changed our bundles. Back to the browser, refresh. All right, look, we've got these icons on table headings, so we can sort each column. We also have this search box here. We can type something here, and DataTables plugin will only show the records that have this keyword in one of their columns. We also have this pagination. Now currently we have only a few customers, but if we had more than 10 customers, DataTables would automatically put them in different pages. And we get all this without writing any extra code. Now in this implementation, we render the view on the server and return HTML markup on the client. DataTables plugin will extract our data from DOM elements and construct its own list of customers. So it will maintain a bunch of JSON objects on the client, and whenever we search for something or sort a column, it will use these JSON objects to provide filtering, sorting, and pagination. Now this approach is pretty simple, and as you saw, it requires only one line of code. But this comes with a cost. We are returning all this HTML markup from the server, and then DataTables has to parse this markup to extract the actual data. Now, this is not an issue if we have a small number of records, but if you're working with a few hundreds or thousands of records, it's better to get raw data from the server, give it to DataTables, and let it generate the HTML markup on the client. This way, instead of returning all the markup from the server, we return JSON objects, which are more lightweight, because we don't have all these HTML tags. Plus, DataTables plugin doesn't have to waste clients' resources to extract data from HTML markup. So in the next lecture, I will show you how to feed our data table using our customers API. All right, so to use our API as the source of data for each data table, we need to provide a configuration object here. In this object, we need a property called AJAX, which is also an object with two properties: URL set to /API/customers, and data src or data source set to an empty string. What is this? Well, imagine our API responded with an object like this. In this case, the customer's property is the actual source of data. So we would set data source to customers. But in our case, the response we get from our API is an array of objects. So this array itself is the actual source of data. And our data table doesn't need to go to another object to get it. That's why we set data source to an empty string. Next, we need to specify our columns. So after AJAX, columns property, which is an array. For each column, we supply an object. And in this object, we specify various properties of that column. For example, we use the data property to tell DataTable plugin where to get data for this column. In the first column, we want to display customer's name. So we set this to name. Now with this configuration, DataTable will look at this property of the customer object and use that as plain text to render each row. But in our first column, we want to have a link that takes us to customer edit page. So we need to supply a custom rendering function. Render is a function. So this function will be called for rendering each row in the table. Now here we can add a few different parameters to control rendering. The first parameter, we call it data, which is the value of this property in our customer object. The second parameter is the type for this column. And the third parameter is the actual object or row we are rendering. We can call this customer. Now in this function, we return a string like this. Double quote, anchor href, single quote, slash customers, slash edit, slash. Now we need to add the ID of this customer. So we can get it from this customer object. Now let's finish the href. So double quote, single quote, which is for the href, then close the A tag. Next, we add the text for this link. And we can either use the data parameter, which will be the name of the customer, or we can use customer.name. And finally, let's close the anchor. Like this. Now the second column, another object. Data should come from membership type.name, but this is not going to work because the customer objects we return from our API do not have this membership type. And that's something we're going to fix in the next step. So for now, let's just render the name. And the third column, data should come from the ID property because we're going to use this in rendering a data attribute for our button. Similar to the first column, let's apply a rendering function. Here, all I need is the ID property, which we can get it from this data parameter. So we don't need to add the additional parameters like type or customer. Now again, we return a string, button, class is single quote, btn-link, and js-delete, single quote again. Now data-customer-id equals, here we add the data parameter, which is the ID of the customer. We close the button tag, set the text to delete, and /button. Pretty simple. Okay, now that we're using our API to render this table, we don't need to render the customers on the server. So we can get rid of this for each block here. But I'm going to leave the table structure as the placeholder for DataTable. Also, in our action, we don't need to get the list of customers because again, our DataTable is going to send an AJAX request to get them from our customer's API. So in Solution Explorer, open up controllers, go to customers controller, select the index action here. We don't need the list of customers. Delete, delete. And this also means, back in our view, scroll up a little bit. Because we're not supplying a model, this code is going to throw an exception. Now, in this case, we don't really need this custom message if we don't have any customers. Earlier, I asked you to implement this just to get used to Razor View syntax. But in your applications, if you really want to display a custom message in case you don't have any customers, you can hook into one of DataTable's events. When it fetches the customers from our API, we can check to see if there are any customers in that array. If not, we can write some jQuery code to render this custom message on the page. So I'm going to get rid of this if and else block. Select the table, cut, delete this, and paste the table here. Now let's test this. Build, back to the browser, refresh. Beautiful. Now our customers are fetched from our API. Next, I'm going to show you how to add membership type here. Okay, what we currently get from our customer's API is like this. We don't have their membership type here. So let's go to our customer's controller. And this is the API controller. in get customers action, we need to eager load the customers with their membership type. So first we go on top and add using system.data.entity. And with this, we can use the include method here. Customer goes to customer.membership type. Now this code is getting a little bit too long, so let's break it up to make it more readable. I like to break it up like this. Chain all these method calls, one on each line. That's much better. Okay, now put the cursor on customer DTO. We can quickly go to this class by pressing Ctrl B. Here we are. Look, there is no membership type property here. We only have membership type ID. And as I explained before, we shouldn't add membership type property here because this couples our DTO to our domain object, membership type. And that's something we should avoid. So we need to create a separate class and call it membership type DTO. In Solution Explorer, right-click DTOs, add a new class, membership type DTO. Now, all I'm going to add here is ID and name. There's no need to add all membership type properties here. Because if a client wants to know the details about a given membership type, they can use the ID here to send a request to a potentially new endpoint for membership types. So we want to keep this lightweight. Now back to our customer DTO. We change membership type to membership type DTO. And the last step, we go to our mapping profile and teach AutoMapper how to map a membership type to a membership type DTO. So duplicate this line, change this to membership type, and this one to membership type DTO. Now let's test our API. Build, back to Chrome. I'm going to click send again. Okay, beautiful. Look, we got our membership type here. With this, we can go back to our index.cshtml and change the data property of the second column to membership type.name. Save, back to Chrome, refresh. There you go. So this is how we return hierarchical data from our API. All right, now let me show you a bug with our data table. I'm going to delete this John Smith with a plus. Delete. Okay. It's gone here. But if I go in the search box and type John, look, it's back here. So in the next lecture, I'm going to show you why this is happening and how to resolve it. So in the last video, I showed you the bug with our data table. If we delete a row, it will stay there. Here's the reason. Look at this line. Here, we're just removing this node from the DOM. In other words, we are removing the TR element from our table. But as you've learned, DataTable keeps the list of customers internally. So when we go back and search for something in this table, the table is refreshed using that internal list. And of course, we didn't delete our customer from that list. So to fix this, instead of working directly with the DOM, we should remove the corresponding customer from the internal list of our data table. Then we'll tell DataTable to redraw itself. Now, first of all, we need a reference to our data table. So let's scroll up. Here, when we call the DataTable function, we can get the result and store it in a variable called table. Now, back in our success callback function, we start with the table. We call the row method. And here we need to pass a reference to the TR. So I'm going to use button.parents of TR here. So we have the row. Then we call the remove method. This will delete the corresponding customer from the internal list maintained by DataTable. And finally, we call the draw method. And with this, that customer will disappear from the view. So all these methods you see here, like row, remove, and draw, they're part of DataTable API. DataTable has a lot of useful methods and events that you can find on their documentation at datatables.net. Now let's test this. Save, back to the browser, refresh. I'm going to delete Joe Smith. Okay. Now if I search for Joe, it's no longer there. All right, before we finish up this section, there are a couple of things I would like to point out. One is about the performance of DataTables plugin. So currently, our DataTable gets all customers from our API and stores them internally to do its pagination, searching, and sorting. Now, this approach works well when you have a few hundred to roughly about a couple of thousand records. Of course, this is subjective and depends on the size of objects you return from your API. In our customer's API, each customer object has only a few properties. But if you returned a fat customer object, I would say 1,000 records would probably be the highest limit to do pagination, sorting, and searching on the client efficiently. So if you're returning a large number of objects from your API, you would better do pagination, sorting, and searching on the server. And of course, this means you have to explicitly implement these features on the server side. And then in your data tables, you enable server-side processing. Now, this is really beyond the scope of our ASP.NET MVC course, and you need to read about it yourself. I just wanted to give you some direction. Another point I want to discuss is this JavaScript code we have written here. Currently, we don't have proper separation of concerns in this code. Some parts are for the view, other parts are about data access, like this bit here. We're calling our backend API, and these are two different responsibilities. We need to separate the part that is responsible for the view from the part that is responsible for data access. Plus, it's better to extract this JavaScript code and put it in a separate JavaScript file. So in the second part of this course, I'm going to dedicate one section on refactoring JavaScript code. Unfortunately, in this part, I can't spend more time on this because our focus is on ASP.NET MVC and not on client-side development. And there are still quite a few other aspects of MVC framework that I need to talk about. So I think this code is okay for now. Let's move on to the next topic. Another topic I wanted to briefly talk about is single-page applications, or SPAs. So with our new implementation, we're generating the customers table on the client. In other words, we're generating a part of the view on the client. Now, we could take this to the next level and generate the entire view or the entire page on the client. With this architecture, on the server side, we would have a number of APIs that are purely responsible for getting or modifying data. All the views will be generated on the client, which means we won't be using MVC Razor views. Applications built with this kind of architecture are called single-page applications. In a single-page application, when the user clicks on a link, instead of sending a request to the server to get the entire markup for the new page, we make an AJAX call to an API, get the required data, and generate the view on the client. And then we replace the view in the main content area with another view. So essentially, we have a single page whose content gets updated as the user navigates from one area of the application to another. And that's why we call these applications single-page applications. Now, what is the benefit of this architectural style? Well, it makes the user experience faster and smoother because we don't have to reload an entire page as the user navigates from one area to another. So the page doesn't flicker. Good examples of single-page applications that you've definitely seen are Gmail, Google+, and Outlook. This kind of architectural style is getting more popular. And while most of the applications out there do not follow this architectural style, I believe we're going to have more and more of these single-page applications in the future. You probably have heard of frameworks like Angular, Backbone, and Ember. These frameworks provide a few abstractions that make it easier for you to build single-page applications. So if you want to build a single-page application on the server, you can use ASP.NET Web API to build a bunch of RESTful APIs. And on the client, you can use one of these frameworks, like Angular. I have a couple of comprehensive courses on both Backbone and Angular, so if you want to learn more about either of these frameworks, you can find my courses on Udemy. Now, Backbone or Angular, which one is better? I would definitely say Angular. Well, more accurately, Angular 2, because it's been developed using the latest best practices for the modern applications of today and future. Alright, now as an exercise, I want you to use what you have learned in this section and add data tables to our movies list. This data table should get the data using the API you built in the last section. Also, implement deleting a movie by using Bootbox and jQuery AJAX to call our backend API. So this section was all about client-side development. You saw how easy it is to call web APIs using jQuery AJAX. You also learned about two of my favorite jQuery plugins, Bootbox and DataTable. In the next section, we're going to add authentication and authorization to our application. We want to make sure that certain features are only available to users with a specific role. So I will see you in the next section.